You defended, Juliet Holness, Speaker of the House, against Mark Golding, and you called him, can I read it here? Yeah, he undermined, contradicted, emasculated the very people he has appointed.
Right. No. So what I said is that we have two instances of senior members of the opposition coming out and making affirmative statements, meaning statements in support of a move by the government.
Yes.
And then sometime later, in some cases days later, in other cases months later, the Mark Golding comes out and essentially overturns those decisions. What I said is that undermines those figures, that emasculates them, and that makes it difficult to trust what they say. The two practical examples are, the first that I'll give is when we introduced the parliamentary salaries last year, and I gave first of all, I had a meeting with 5 or 6 opposition MPs where the principle was outlined, which is clearly that ministers' salaries are benchmarked to permanent secretaries. It's been that way for 50 years. MPs are benchmarked to ministers. And that is what we're going to do and keep, etc. And those persons shall remain nameless, but there was support.
That market sensitive too? Yeah.
It was definitely market sensitive until I did the speech, right?
Yeah.
And then when I gave the speech, which had the details, Julian Robinson got up and said, the opposition has no issue with what the minister has announced. He didn't say me, Julian Robinson. He spoke for the opposition. Now I say to you now, if the opposition did not support it, it would not have gone through. And it's one of the reasons why we haven't had this reform, certainly for parliamentarians in the past, because government and opposition could not agree. Back in 2003 was the last major effort when Prime Minister Patterson was in charge, and he tried hard, but he could not get the then opposition to agree, and so it didn't go ahead. Similarly, if the opposition had said plainly and honestly that they were against it, it would not have happened. So Julian Robinson got up and said the opposition is for it, and then days later,
and the backlash,
Golding, the leader of the opposition, Mark Golding, releases a press release saying the opposition is against it. That is what I was saying. Undermines and emasculates Julian Robinson, because who's going to believe him again on a big issue if Mark is not sitting beside him? The second example is when Philip Hallwell got up and publicly supported the elevation of the Deputy Speaker, who happened to be the wife of the Prime Minister, to the position of Speaker. Which means, and he did so on behalf of the opposition, which means the principle of Mrs. Holness serving as Speaker, though she happens to also be the wife of the Prime Minister, was not something that the opposition was objecting to.
Yes.
Now, fast forward several months, and there's a disagreement on specific issues. And let me be very clear. The leader of the opposition and the opposition has every right to disagree on the things they disagreed on. My argument is not over the substance of what they're disagreeing on. My argument is that what you ought to do is to pursue those arguments. Don't turn back on a principle that you have publicly agreed to. Meaning, it's kind of like you've agreed to a principle. Now there's an argument on a specific point. Argue the specific point. Take the point. You never know who would be there to support you. Take the point to the people. But then don't go back now and say, this principle we no longer agree to.
Yeah,
that's the point I'm saying. That's not principled. It's like the examples I'm giving you earlier of principle when I'm faced with some of these decisions. If you are going to be flip-flop on your principles, right, and willy-nilly on your principles, then people can't trust you. They have to know what your principles are, and you apply your principles to each situation. So I am supporting his right to challenge the Speaker in a respectful manner on things that he might disagree with. He is within his right to do so.
Okay.
What I'm saying is, don't use the cheap card, right, of overturning something that we know that your party supported. Okay. And then what's more, what I was saying is that in how he referred to the speaker, he referred to her essentially. He basically said, the decision of the government to appoint the wife of the prime minister. Okay, it is true that she's the wife of the prime minister, but in that context, there's a more important relationship, meaning for the elevation.
Yeah.
And that context is that she was deputy speaker.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Now, this is what happened to women a lot, that we define women. And I'm not using the word of misogyny. I don't know where misogyny comes from. I am not making a claim of misogyny at all. I'm saying that what we do is we undermine women when we speak about them in their relationship to a man, where there are other ways of describing them that are more appropriate for the context. So somebody who was a deputy speaker, who now gets promoted to become speaker, you don't refer to the first and only reference can't be wife. One of the references has to be deputy speaker. Wife is relevant. I'm not saying wife shouldn't be there.
Because you can't go around it.
You can't go around it. It's a wife.
Yeah.
You can't go around it. But to leave out deputy speaker, right? It sends a message to people that she's there just because she's wife. There was no intention for her to be speaker when she was appointed deputy speaker. Everybody thought that she'd be deputy speaker for the entire term. There was a speaker there. There was a unplanned event, an unfortunate event that developed, and the speaker was no longer available. In every system that we know, the deputy succeeds the person who is the principal. And my position is that to be balanced in the critique and to be respectful in the critique, you must include the fact that she was deputy speaker, not just wife.
True,
she is wife, but she's deputy speaker who happens to be wife.
I guess the fact of her being wife raises some concerns that the position as wife could trump the position as the position of Speaker of the House in regards to
matters of the government. Right.
So,
and I mean, and in defense of Minister, Mr. Golding, he was saying that at the time he agreed to installing her as the Speaker of the House, but is due to, I guess, issues in Parliament or parliamentary issues or procedures like she...
and again, my response to that is to be respectful to her as an individual.
Okay.
Then what you do is you challenge her as an individual. Say, I don't believe you're being a good speaker. You're being a bad speaker. I believe that what you're doing is wrong. Right? What you do is you deal with the substance of the issue.
And about the substance is a conflict of interest of her being the wife of the prime minister.
But here's where that goes. Here's where that is wrong. The position, whether you believe in the position or not, okay, the position that she's adopted on these issues was the same position that the person before her had, Marissa Dalrymple. Was Marissa Dalrymple the wife? No. So it is clear that the position is independent of being wife because it was a position before, and Mark Golding knows that. And that's my point. Okay, this is not a position that was arrived at because of being wife. It was a position that Marissa Dalrymple held, and when she demitted office, she passed
on the same issues,
wrote memos, passed on the issues, said to the speaker, etc. Okay, so if you're respectful of an individual, you don't jump to their marital relationships to explain. You see it for what it is. The person who she succeeded had that position, and she merely has continued the position of her predecessor. The predecessor was not wife. Therefore, the position was not arrived at because of wife.
Okay.
Understood? Yeah. So, we've
understand. I'm not going.
I'm not. I talked to Mark already. It's important that you understand.
Yeah.
Right? So, let me be very clear that the government supports the position of the Auditor General. I have been on record that I believe that the Office of the Auditor General plays an indispensable role in our society. Jamaica could not function without the Auditor General playing the role that she does. Just her mere presence and the fact that she's around means that people observe procedures. So her role is critical, and her role is protected by the Constitution. She doesn't need my protection. It's protected by the Constitution. And, she produces reports that are of value. Sometimes we politicize the reports. We frame them in narrow, selfish ways that sometimes destroy people, but that miss the essence of what we can learn from the reports. But the role is essential, and it's very important that the public become aware of the contents of those reports in as quick a time as possible. Those are principles that we all believe in and support.